Up to this point, we've been learning a lot more about forms and the form controls and how all of that works. But I wanted to focus a little bit more on what we call server-side processing. And this is where we send data back to the server and it does something with that and sends it back, or confirms something, or sends an email, or whatever that might be. And up to this point, we've been using this fragmented link identifier, which basically can skip to a section of the page and to a specific ID. But because I don't have an ID, it goes to the top of the page. And because I'm not doing an index.html and I just have the hashtag, it goes to the top of whatever page I'm on. So if you ever see that again, that's kind of what that means. But I'm going to take that out and I'm going to put in this URL back to a file that I use for an assignment. And what it's meant to do is to capture and tell you what data that it has accepted. Okay, so I'm going to save that. We're going to reload the page here and go down to the file and type out an email at domain.com. Let's get us a spider monkey because yes, and hit send. And you can see here that it's accepted the post variables, email, type, Y, and submit, and their corresponding data. And that really, again, like we've said, comes back from this input type text. It's looking for that name, email, and that's the variable. And then whatever I typed in becomes its data. And so you can see that for that, the select we sent, for the text area, and even for this input, because I put a name equals submit, it says submit equals send, and the value is send on that. So it's really important to see how that works. We can also change this over to get really quick, just so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on there. So we'll do another email at domains.com, and yes. And now you can see that it recognizes that it's coming in as a get variables. And it's still all there, but the difference is inside of my URL now, we can see that email equals, that email address, type equals Japanese, And so you don't want to use get because it's going to come through the URL and get saved in the browser history or any node as it jumps across the network or the internet to whatever server you're on. And so those are kind of the two things that you can use. Now, we've talked about this action that we're sending the data to, and probably should shed some light more on what is doing this processing. Well, in the case of our page, I've got this file here called mail.php. And really, it's not sending an email. It could, but what it's doing right now is taking and looking at what data is being sent there and then just displaying it back, right? And it uses a language called PHP. And that's a recursive algorithm for PHP hypertext preprocessor. There's lots of different languages out there. You might use Node.js, you might use Microsoft's .NET, an ASP, Ruby on Rails, some really old Cold Fusion, or Java server pages, lots of different things that exist out there today. Here's an example of what some PHP might look like if you wanted to utilize it. But you can see here how they're just taking an email address and a subject and an email body through here, and they're just using a mail function and putting all of those variables back in, and it just sends an email. And really, we can take and mix our PHP into our HTML if we want. Now, if anybody is really curious on still diving into this more, I have some videos linked on the resources page that you can look at. And I'll show how to write some of these functions, how to create templates, and do some really cool things with some PHP. Again, PHP probably runs, I think, somewhere around 85% of the internet. It's not necessarily the best, but it's an easy language to get started with. It's what runs WordPress, and WordPress, I think, alone counts for like almost nearly 30% of the internet, which is pretty crazy. But those are definitely some options if you want to get into it. Another thing, if you want to do some more with your own forms, you can look at something like FormSpree. And what it allows you to do is in the action, you're going to put their URL / your form ID that they're going to give you. and then use the method post, and then make sure you put names in there, and it will send the data back to them, and then they can email it or do other things to it that you would like. And so fun little page if you want to explore some more into that server-side processing without having to learn a whole language or things like that.